So we're gonna welcome our next guest.
Ah,
Yes,
Yeah.
Shawna Baca. So check this out really quick.
woo!
All right, we want to welcome her right now. Hello, hello.
Hey guys.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing just good. How are you?
Doing
Good.
great. I read the book excerpts that you sent us, and I'm glad we had a little bit of time before the show so I could compose myself after the first chapter that I read. That was rather rough, but beautifully written. Very good story. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Not to mention that trailer was incredible, and you could actually feel like the intense emotion. Like, I need to read this. Like, I know you have some background in filmmaking, but the fact that you could bring that emotion out to what you felt on those pages that you gave us was incredible.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, as a filmmaker, want to make films. I never thought I was going to write a book, let alone write a book about panic attacks and agoraphobia. But, and the book's kind of been done for a while. I think it was just kind of like a cathartic experience of putting your deepest, darkest secrets out into the world. That's like truly wearing my heart on my sleeve, but I felt like it was the time because I feel like our society and our nation is in a state of mental chaos right now. And, people are, fear of the unknown, panic. For me, I was an agoraphobic for a year. I didn't leave my house except to go to therapy once a week. And, this pandemic, it was like, I kind of had an epiphany. It was like, oh gosh, now I understand. It all makes sense. Like everything that I experienced back then when I was 21 and I was terrified to go outside of the house prepared me for this pandemic. I mean, I'm somebody who could stay inside the house, and not freak out and not have a mental, breakdown. I mean, I knew like I developed tools on how to cope with isolation. So, I just thought, okay, I'm going to release this book now. And if if nobody reads it, then, nobody reads it. It was, a good experience for me to kind of purge that. But if it helps someone out there who's suffering from depression or panic, then, it served its purpose.
Oh yeah, even if it touches one person, that matters, man. That's the same with comedy too. Comedy, books, movies, your goal is just to touch somebody. Even if it's one person, because you just never know. That one person might be in a point in their life where they need that light to get out of the darkness, man.
Yeah.
Shawna, I have a question. Like, if someone asks for your help, like, what's the quickest, fastest tool that you would give anybody that's dealing with isolation? Like, what's the first thing you would say to someone who said, this pandemic, I don't know what to do?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question because that's, a lot of the fear that we have is fear on perception, basically, of how we see the world, right? Like me getting panic attacks was scary enough, but what was more scary is the fear of the fear. It's like you're watching, even in watching horror films, right? When we see, Michael or Jason or whatever serial killer comes out, you're like, okay, but it's those points leading up to it, right? Where it's like, you're the kid that's like looking for your friend out in the woods, and you're freaking out because you don't know, and you hear these like little creaks, and these like sounds of natures, and you don't know when it's going to jump out of you. I mean, that's like a panic attack, like it's the fear of the fear that it's going to happen. So, I would just say there are, if somebody is experiencing these things, the best thing for like me is to get out in nature, because nature always has that kind of calming effect. You don't want to be in a place where there's a lot of activity, and a lot of movement and things going around. If you can meditate, which most people probably can't in their early stages of panic or having an anxiety attack, because you can't control it. It's coming at you. What I learned is if that's happening, you can basically cup your hands, breathe through it, put your head between your knees, it slows down your breathing. And then also it'd be great to focus on something. Like for me, it was painting. I used to paint ceramics or whatever, because you'd have to focus and paint these fine, small little lines. So a lot of people say you color and for anxiety. It takes you out of your head, of that monkey brain, like just everything kind of like going a mile a minute, and you're that flight or fight response going off.
Yeah.
Quick question. What inspired you to want to write the book?
Well, I was going through kind of a dark period in my life because I had lost my best friend. She died in a kind of very freakish car accident. And then my grandmother died, and my grandmother raised me when I was young. And so she was like my mother. So, I mean, I was experiencing these losses, and I was kind of in a dark place. And I think in order to kind of tap into that, those times and that trauma, like I probably needed to be in that dark space. And I didn't know I was going to write a book. It was like one of those things where I got up and I was on my way to get coffee first thing in the morning to the kitchen. I sat in front of my computer and I was like, why did I sit here? Wait, why did I sit? One of those moments where you do something, you don't know why you did it. And then it was like, oh, I'm going to write a book. And I'm like, what? I'm going to write a book? Like, it's kind of almost this, I'm going to write this book. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to write this book. And so I did. And then I decided to go back to school because that was like the one thing that I regretted not going and finishing. So when it was at school that I was like, oh my God, when I had panic attacks like 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, when I would sit in these rooms with these people that were like all in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And back then it was like deemed a condition that affected people having midlife crises, basically, like in those years. And so when I was on the campus, I was like mortified to learn that like suicide is the second leading cause of death on college campuses. Wow. There was a lot of people like depressed in school because it was like during the first election where like Trump won, and like and people were like really, really in this state of like depression. I mean, it really affected, and I never seen the kids get so crazy about politics, because I mean, when I was 20, I didn't care about politics. And but there was so much anxiety. I mean, I'd watch these kids, like they were terrified to get up in front of a class to speak to, the students or like present their projects. And I learned that now panic attacks and, anxiety disorders affect people like from 17 to like, I think it's like 17 to 25 is like the highest percentage. And it's like 17 to 25. And it's predominantly like more women than men. And I was like, well, how did this shift? Because I was the one person having a midlife crisis at 21, you know what I mean? But it like, and I don't know if, we're just learning more. They're like taking more interest in psychology and emotions and how they, trigger responses, or how we deal with life skills based on like traumatic, experiences or emotions that we kind of still hold on to, or if our society has just changed more rapidly because of technology. Like everything just moves so much faster.
Yeah.
Now, Shauna, quick question, and I kind of want you to keep it brief because I'm pretty sure you probably talk about it in your book, but how did it happen? Like you didn't have it, right? And then it just happened for that year. How?
To be honest, I was like drinking a lot. Like I had a fake ID since I was, I don't know, like 13 or 14 years old. And, I had a lot of like traumatic experiences during my childhood. And I think that, those kinds of things like drinking and partying, drugs, stuff like that, were, my coping mechanism.
Right.
And then when I turned 21, I was like, oh, this isn't who I want to be. And then I kind of just, quit smoking cigarettes, quit drinking alcohol, quit, partying, and going to raves and stuff like that. And I don't think that I don't know, maybe there was like some sort of trigger of not having something to cope.
That is actually incredible because this is the unfortunate reality. If you're building stuff in that you haven't addressed, problems or things that are going on in your life, and you suppress them, things can randomly occur that you don't expect. I mean, I developed a really bad, severe anxiety problem maybe like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It was caused by my hearing loss. And it's crazy because panic attacks happen in different varieties of ways, right? So you can be that person that clenches your jaw so much, apparently it can like change the structure of your tongue. You could be that person that just grabs your hand and just like starts like thinking, and you can stop breathing. Like you can think or you can feel like you're having a heart attack or having this random chest pain. You think it's heartburn, but in reality, it's your anxiety. So it's really you're very brave to talk about these things that a lot of people don't talk about. I really honestly praise you because that is incredible.
Thank you.
Also without giving too much away of the book at all, the experience the chapter that I read, I mean, you were deprived of sleep so much to the point that when you had a certain panic attack, right, you had to go to the emergency room, correct?
Oh my God. Yeah. I had a frequent flyer, like a VIP card, like to the ER. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I went to the ER. It was to the point where, I mean, no, granted, when I first got it, I mean, I had physical, like when you're having a panic attack or an anxiety attack, it's very physical. Like, so the first time I had it, I thought that I was having a heart attack, because I didn't realize that the palpitations and the chest pains were hyperventilation, and I didn't know what was really going on with me, other than the fact that I was feeling this like heartbeat, chest pounding. I can't breathe. I can't catch my breath. And then, I'm like, I got to get to the ER. But I mean, I was convinced, for a really long time, for probably like a good, 6, 7, 8 months, that it was definitely a physical condition. I didn't even relate it to being any in the slightest psychosomatic. So I mean, it was a very like, I mean, nowadays it's like you can actually Google anything, but back then, if you wanted information, you had to walk to the library. It's like you can, things weren't accessible. So I was a little bit more ignorant. Knowledge, to gain knowledge, I had to go outside of my comfort zone, my environment. There weren't a lot of books on panic attacks. So now it's like I think it's easier to sort of navigate like what's happening. But just to go back to what you were saying about brave. I think that there's been a stigma about mental illness or mental disorders for a really long time. And I think that it's really important to talk about things, to talk about our vulnerabilities, to talk about our fears, because what happens is that every time like I talk to anybody I know about my book way before it was published, and in my experiences with panic attacks and agoraphobia, like every single one of the people that I spoke to then shared their experience with some sort of fear, whether it was panic, fear, anxiety, or just something bad that has happened to them. And what that does is it sort of creates a space of connection. And I think that when you have panic attacks and agoraphobia, or you suffer from depression or bipolar, I mean, it's important to know that you're not alone. So by one person sharing their story, the other person can then feel that connection and not feel like they're alone. It's a really like a powerful thing, just having that kind of dialogue, and we need to have more of it, because there's nothing wrong with expressing that you've had an anxiety attack. We shouldn't be shamed for that.
Wow. Like, Shawna, it feels like, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. Like you are the change that we seek. Like I didn't even know what panic attacks were until I think maybe after I stopped having them, when I started finding out that these moments where I would feel dizzy and feel like I was going to pass out, like I would be in places and I thought something, like, of course I thought something was wrong with me, but I thought it was me. So I never really told anybody. This went on for a while until it didn't. And I just would, whenever I would feel it coming, because it would just feel like the room was spinning really fast. And then I would just like sit really wherever I was, and whenever it would happen, I would just sit really still. But it's been probably in the last 5 or 10 years. And that was easily 15 years ago that was happening, but I didn't know where to turn or what was going on. And like you said, and it's probably been more than that, I didn't know what to look up, and I didn't know, and without even, we'd have to come and bring you back on. So many stigmas in the African-American community around mental health. So it's very hard to tell anybody that you think something is wrong with you, because you don't, because it just feels like you won't be believed, or you won't be very supported, or you just need to. So thank you for everything that you just said.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, we
you.
do have a guest or a comment that has actually asked a question of our guest,
Mhm.
and it's from our guest next week, Ed Namrock from the Ed Namrock Show. He's got a question right there, so we should let our commenters ask a question. And he's asking Shawna, is there any particular social settings that trigger these panic attacks?
I think it's actually unique. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but I can only tell you guys from my experience. And so I guess, they say that to be an expert at anything, you have to like either be educated or, have at least 10,000 hours of experience. So I guess I can say I'm an expert in it, but not by education, just by experience. I would say for me, the way that I found out that what my triggers was finding commonalities in the journals that I wrote in. So everywhere that I went, that I had a panic attack, I had to write down every single thing that was in my environment, not necessarily what was just happening around me, but I'll give you an example. Like, I was in the park one day and I started to feel like, like I was getting anxiety. And my therapist at the time had asked, well, what was going on? What was around you? And I said, well, there was a woman over here, like on the left side, on the playgrounds with her infant child, and she was holding, her baby. And then to the right, there was a man cooking, barbecuing all by himself. And, that doesn't seem like anything that would trigger you, right? You're in nature, the birds are chirping, like the sun is out, your feet are on the grass. But my commonality was that it ended up being the trigger of the separation of my family, because my dad was killed when I was 7.5 months old, and my mom was 17 when she had me. So the divide is me seeing a mom to the left with her infant child holding it, and then to the right, a man by himself. So it's a separation of the family. So it gets like, as it gets that deep, because they say that like babies, can have separation anxiety at a very young age. So even though I couldn't understand that, then that becomes part of my molecular structure, right? And it's stored within me on a cellular level.
Right.
And I don't even know, because like you said, time passes, you suppress it, but then you repress it. So now I have a divide between, this feeling and really being aware of how to connect those two things.
Now, Shawna, I know, unfortunately, we're going to have to cut it really soon, but I did
Sure.
want to have one last question, because you're really inspiring, and a lot of people have similar experiences or had completely different, but you self-published your book, right? And you had
Yeah.
it on Amazon. What tips do you give to people that want to tell their stories and get this out?
It was a learning process for me, because I'm a, filmmaker. But writing a book is not in my wheelhouse. It's not in my background. But I really think that, once setting your intention of something that you have, a passion or conviction to do and get out, I think that, you find the way, you learn how to do it. And I'm still kind of navigating through that whole process. But what I do know is that, so many people are self-publishing right now. Even if I did get a traditional publisher, I might still have to do a lot of the legwork because I'm an unknown writer, right?
Yeah.
And then the idea is, is my story really something that has to be something that Random House publishes? I mean, it's really for somebody who actually might need it. And I know that it's going to launch on the 7th of September on Kindle, and it's going to be free to all the Kindle Select people. So it's not, but anyway, I'm doing I'm my own PR person right now. I'm, my own marketing person. And, again, I'm trying to just get it out to more of the people that need it, but just do it. I really am a believer that, yes, you should do your due diligence. Yes, you should find, what you need. I hired a book editor a couple of years ago. That I found, and he was fantastic. I didn't know how to format a book, but if you want something bad enough, you'll go for it. And I think that you should be inspired. Don't ever be afraid to go after something that you believe needs to get done.
Wow. Thank you, Shauna. Wow.
Thank you for having me on.